told Nico I was going to make a little fun of myself, but when you hear high performance director, it's such a wide, broad title. I'm like, what is a high performance director and what does that involve? So I took to Google, and Google tells us that it's the director of high performance will create the right environment for people to feel empowered, to be able to make their own decisions and to thrive, not just survive. And they'll combine art and science, bringing technical capabilities, analytics, and evidence-based thinking alongside human insight and understanding. So I'll ask you, do you think that that's an accurate assumption of what your job entails?
Yeah. I think that makes it sound really more complicated than maybe it is, but it's a fancy way of saying it. But I think the high performance director, at a high level is someone that's combining, integrating, creating a sense of collaboration between sports science and medicine and medical group and coaching and strength conditioning, and making sure that we talk about, a lot in pro sports and collegiate sports, there can easily be a big silo effect, right? Where you have your coaches over here and you have your medical over here and you have your strength conditioning over here, and they don't really talk so well to each other, and their perception is purely from their own way of seeing the world, right? And so my goal and my job is making sure that we're breaking down the silos in some ways and bringing all those groups together in the same discussion at all times, right? And so I think that's managing that whole dialogue on a daily basis as we make decisions and and it's very much, maybe that's what your definition says, role of a facilitator in some ways, right? You're facilitating this process of collaboration and interdisciplinary thinking, I guess.
Yeah, if you can kind of lay it out for the listeners or viewers that are going to see this, how does Austin FC specifically, how do you guys work together on a day-to-day basis to make sure that, you're able to do your job and they're able to do their job? Yeah.
Well, in some ways, I guess we try it where it's all us, right? So it's really medical, sports science, fitness, coaching, right? They were all having this discussion. So, our office is just at a structural level. Our offices are together with medical and performance. We would call that performance is really anything that's strength conditioning and sports science together. We will call performance and some analytics. So performance and medical share the exact same space, right? And my office is in one end of that office build space, and our director of sports medicine is on the other, and we have 10, 11 staff members sitting in there, and then I'm going back and forth between the coach's office, multiple times per day to discuss with them game prep as well as current player status. And then just, again, facilitating this discussion amongst all stakeholders to make sure we are prepping the players for the next game.
What kind of technology would you say has started to emerge for that player preparation that you've seen over the last couple of years? How is that impacting player status?
The big thing is the first is what's happening on the field. So you have this whole phrase of player tracking, right? So there's player tracking, and player tracking could be GPS, where the players wear GPS on a daily basis. And then in all MLS stadiums and NBA arenas, there's a system called Second Spectrum, which has it's a series of cameras that creates a coordinate location for every player and then can look at all their physical work performed. So with the player tracking, you have either a wearable in terms of GPS, our players wear GPS units and heart rate straps for every training. Mm-hmm. And then live in game, they're also wearing the GPS devices, but they're also being tracked with the optical tracking so that you can, you're really looking at what you're doing relative to what the other team is doing as well, right? So you're getting the running information from both teams. So that's the big piece, So the first piece is measuring what are our players doing today, right? What physical work are they actually performing? Mm-hmm. And that comes to then what's the external work of that is whatever your tracking devices say. The heart rate's picking up what's the internal cost of that. Mm-hmm. And then And then in the post game period, right, we would use some sort of heart rate variability technology, omega wave, or there's lots of other HRV type technologies where now you're looking at what's their response to whatever they did in the game or training, and that's kind of systemically, or there's certain systems that are more fatigued than others, and neuromuscular versus CNS, cardiac, and now you're really trying to figure out from that standpoint what level of fatigue do our players have. And then as you track that week to week to week, you're looking at this acute response to games, and then chronically what's happening over weeks and months in terms of their response to all that.
Yeah. I think probably my biggest question, like when I think about that, is who's running the fastest mile on Austin FC? And you're looking at that type of data, but can you give us some insight at like the professional
I guess
level?
the interesting would say, like, I couldn't actually tell you who runs the fastest mile because we never would actually run a mile run. And so, I could tell you who has the fastest sprints and who has the fastest acceleration, who has the best deceleration, when those are more very sport-specific type movements.
Okay. Who's the fastest?
We have a couple, and it obviously depends on the game, but I think John Gallagher is probably might be our fastest player this year in game. You look at someone like Sebastian Driussi that has just amazing acceleration, deceleration capabilities, and then you have someone like Owen Wolf, who's a young player who actually shows a lot of the same physical profiles of Sebastian Driussi in terms of his accel and decel profiling.
It's really interesting hearing you talk about all of the analytics and data and the kind of in-game reads. My question to you would be, are you able to make suggestions, recommendations at the half based on, these GPS trackers, or are you kind of just going to let them do their thing and we'll, evaluate post-game?
Good question. I would say there's so many other factors that are important in terms of tactically what's going on in the game and what the opponent is doing that, I think I would say no decision is ever made only on the physical side, right? So, and then also typically it's very, very, very rare that you'd see that data in the first half, that a player might be fatigued, hopefully.
Yeah.
Now you clearly see, the interesting thing about most soccer games, but definitely relative to MLS that I find really interesting is that it can be very chaotic. It's a very fast-paced game, and it kind of, like most soccer games, it kind of ebbs and flows. And then you get to about the 70th minute of most MLS games, and the game like really just opens up. And part of it is because the fatigue level of the players, and part of it is the tactical discipline of the players. But, we can actually track 5-minute blocks of tempo over the course of the game. And you can kind of see the game go, the game starts at a really high level, high speed, and then it kind of drops the first half. Then it starts really fast again. Then it drops 60th, 70th minute, and then it takes off. And part of that is the players on the field have been playing the whole game. They get tired. And then you're injecting these new fresh players coming onto the field while the players that are on the field have been on there the whole game start to tire, and there's more gaps defensively that might be there. And then the game just becomes this chaotic, almost like out of control game that you hope you can manage better than the opponent, right? So, some of our games this year where you look at the Kansas City game where we came, from behind, New York Red Bull, we fell behind, tried to come back, we're short. Orlando, they had 2 red cards. We came, there's a series of games where the last 20 minutes are just, in some ways, pure madness, in part because enough players in the field tire enough where there's just gaps to run everywhere. And so then if you have the physical ability to run, then you can really just totally exploit the opponent.
Yeah. The MLS is kind of known for more athletic players historically being attacking players versus the defenders, causing like high scoring, right? How do you kind of foresee that potentially changing as the league starts to develop more and more talent comes into the league?
Yeah, no, I think the league has matured tremendously over the past decade, and that just comes because you're spending more money on better players, and as spending increases, you're right, and you're saying that most teams choose to spend the money on more attacking players, and hopefully you have enough solid defenders to be good defensively. But you will reach a point, I think, where as salaries increase, money increases, that there will be more top spending on high-level defenders, which will just make it a better product, a better game as well. But you can only spend so much money on so many players, and most teams do prefer to spend that on more attacking type players.
And you've had experience and the opportunity to train some really high-profile athletes. One that comes to mind is Clint Dempsey, coming from the English Premier League to the MLS. What's kind of the biggest difference that you see with players like that, kind of who've experienced the highest level versus maybe someone coming out of college, right?
Yeah.
Into the MLS. What's the difference there mentally that you see as they kind of enter into your program?
I think there's definitely the technical and the psychological. I mean, I think to play at the highest level from a skill and technique standpoint, you have to have a certain level of skill that these guys have. And obviously what someone like Clint Dempsey could do with the ball, Sebastian Driussi, some of those played, Freddie Ljungberg in one of the first, Seattle Sounders teams, what they can do with the ball is, extremely rare and not something that we produce in this country so often. But then we do have skilled players. But then the next layer is, do I know when to do it and why to do it, right? And so it's decision making. If you look at players that tend to be skillful in this country and not so lower levels, right? What do? They dribble too much. They take people on too much. They try to beat players when they shouldn't be trying to beat players, right? They're not seeing what's going on in front of them. And at the high levels, you just don't see that, right? You don't see, these high level players get their heads down and try to dribble through three guys just to try to dribble through three guys. Right? You don't see that. But in this country, with our skilled players sometimes and how they're coached, I feel like it's this balance, right? Because you want to promote individuality, but you also want to promote high-level soccer, right? And if you watch the best players, you watch Man City, for instance, it's probably the best team in the world right now. There's no over-dribbling, right? There's no over-dribbling ever.
Yeah.
Right? The whole mindset is we pass the ball to move the opponent where they don't want to go to, and then we exploit the spaces they leave behind and we play behind them. That's really high-level soccer. And the players that come to this league that have been in that environment, they understand that. Sometimes in this country, we produce these players and we teach them hey, you're different, you're special, take people on, dribble, express yourself. But it has to but then it's the when, it has to be at the right time. And I don't think we do at times a great job of teaching that. We just let them go and think, well, they're expressing themselves and they're trying to be skillful. That's really good.
Do you think that the Austin FC youth professional program is going to have an impact on changing the landscape of what we're kind of teaching these kids, right? Like what you said, and giving them the right mentality. Is that driven out of a youth professional program like Austin FC, or? Yeah,
I think so. And if you looked at a lot of the top, the top 4 to 5 under 17 players currently will spend time training with us, quite often, and so they're already seeing that as juniors in high school, which should be profoundly impactful on their development. And we have again Owen Wolf, within our team now that should be a high school senior who's living that and sees that on a daily basis. So if you look at a lot of the top soccer nations, that's what they're doing. You go to the Bundesliga in Germany, they're exposing these kids at 17, 18, basically just throwing them into the first team, and the ones that thrive pick that up and learn, the when very quickly, and not just the what to do with the ball. So
I think for me, being an Austin resident almost a year now, seeing Austin get its first professional sports team in Austin FC, it's been palpable just in the community, seeing the fan base and seeing their reaction to Austin FC. What's been your vantage point with your interaction with the fans out in the community? What's that been like?
It's funny because I was in Seattle for their expansion year as well. And so there's lots of kind of similarities in terms of just the amazing exuberance, passion, excitement around the team, right? That feels, and you see, obviously, Seattle's been one of the top teams in the league since they've come in, and there's so many similarities with Austin, and but also I think with Austin is really unique in terms of you have the excitement around the team, but you have this, hipster plus, kind of Latin South American kind of vibe that makes it really, really unique, and I think that you feel that passion from kind of both sides that's really cool, and that's what gives that vibe in the stadium, right? That just because it feels a little bit like if you've been to South America, like an Argentinian type feel in the stadium in terms of the songs and the drums and all that. That it's got that vibe, which makes it different than a Pacific Northwest MLS team, and yet you still have a lot of that same positive. There's also a level of positivity too, right? And that's what separates, I think, some of the MLS markets, right? Because if you go to a place, let's say like Italy is an interesting place. If you go to a place like Italy, the crowds there, they can be really negative. The team gives away 3 passes and then they're booing and they're whistling and they're, and what's wonderful about MLS is they just don't have that. And that's what I think a lot of the players that come over here from Europe, they're shocked at. Like, it's just everyone thinks it's great. Like, it's so positive, and and you can lose 2-3 games. I remember I was in Seattle, and we had a playoff series. A few years ago, 10 years ago, the playoffs were like very much home and away, and we had a great end of season. We went to Salt Lake for the first leg of a 2-leg series, and we lost 3-0. Played really bad, just too over-relaxed when we lost. And like 3 days later, we had the second leg where now you have to overturn this 3-0 deficit. And we show up and we go into practice, and all the crowd comes, like 1,000 fans come with signs like how supporting us, and you can do this, and we've got your back. And, and the European and South American players like, wow. Like, when the fans come after you lose 3-0, they're not coming to cheer you. You're struggling to get out of the practice field, right? And but that positivity, is really unique to MLS, and you feel that exponentially here in Austin, just the level of excitement for the team.
Yeah. What was your experience after the first season like with the team? I guess what was your biggest lesson you took away from that first season?
I think, well, for me personally, I mean, environmentally, the heat is, the climate is you have to figure out how to make it an advantage. Like, it is there, right? Mm-hmm. The climate is here. It is hot. And if you look traditionally, Texas teams for many years were known within the league to, they get to August, September, and they start to kind of wilt and die. And, and then you look at this year, and now you have, Austin and Dallas as second and third. So that's not, I think that's been, both clubs have been able to use the environment and heat to the big advantage. But it took time, in terms of like, when do you practice, making sure the players hydrate, cooling strategies for the players, as you get to game day. And you can turn into a really, really big advantage that I don't necessarily think we're still working through that last year, because mm-hmm. you can read lots of research on it, but there's no research on this is best strategies for an MLS team and, in July and August in Texas heat, right? So there's no research on that. So we had to really figure out how to make it work and how to use an advantage. And now, I think we feel really comfortable that most of these games, the last 20 minutes of these games, like, we're going to be so much stronger than the opponent, and they're going to wilt and die because they're not used to this.
You talked about, or you noted about the game day strategies. How does, you got a game tonight. Yeah. How does strategy differ on game days versus off days for you specifically?
You mean in terms of just for the players, with like what we want the players to do?
Right, kind of how you're prepping them on game day versus a practice day.
A practice day, yeah. Well, I mean, we practice early, so we practice at 9 a.m. Because we found that, if you tip the average, for us, the average, practice is 65 to 75 minutes, right? So it's not super long. And if you can get off the field by 10:15, even in the worst summer, okay, it's still relatively manageable relative to 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So if we can get on the practice field and get off before it's like 85 degrees, we're okay. We make sure, I think it's the constant reminders around chronic heat exposure, right? Like we remind them like, okay, we don't want you practicing from 9 to 10 and then you're at the pool from like 1 to 5, right? Like that's that. And I think the players had to get used to that as well. Because I think the players the first year like, oh, this is great. And I'm done at 10 o'clock. I've got the rest of the day. And I think limiting heat exposure over the rest of the day, especially as you get closer to game day. And then you're not as concerned about cooling strategies on practice days. Because again, it's not super hot, but then on game days, you're doing things like we have cooling vests. You're doing cooling vests before you got to warm-ups, cooling vest at halftime. You're trying to keep core body temperature down. You're trying to really manage hydration status. And, those are really research-driven, effective strategies around, acclimating to heat and performing in high temperatures.
Do you think that's also important to kind of, for a message for a lot of the parents and the youth players out here in Texas, if they wanted to put in some extra work or some extra training?
Yeah.
There's a certain temperature, obviously, that the professionals are training at, and you need to limit heat exposure. A lot of these kids, they go to school all day. Yeah. They get out right at the hottest part of the day, 4 o'clock. If they wanted to put in some extra work, would you recommend, hey, get up before school, get out there when it's a little bit cooler outside and put in 30 minutes or an hour to do like a little technical session?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want them to limit their sleep either, right? Sure. Like sleep is one of the most important factors in performance, but I think a lot of it is timing. Like I think you can do timing and direct, exposure as well. I mean, I have 10, 11-year-old daughters that are, playing in the local soccer community as well, both for the Sting program. And they train at 6 p.m. and it's really hot. And but I think they manage it, and then it's about finding shade and taking lots of breaks and keeping things subtly shorter than you normally would. And because at the end of the day, it's still about how do players get better? Players get better from having high quality training. And you're better off having higher quality training that's shorter than to be out there. I've seen sessions where kids are absolutely exhausted and everything's at snail's pace, and that's not really buying anyone anything. Right. So it's really about paying attention to quality of training and making sure you're taking enough breaks, making sure you're hydrating, making sure players are fueled before they go out there as well. And, that's, I think the post-school thing is to me, the biggest considerations are, is a player fueled properly? Are they hydrated? And are they ready to go out, in the heat and in the sun? And then hopefully the clubs are knowledgeable enough around when the practice is and not making it too long, et cetera.
Awesome. We've got another segment for you. This is like a rapid fire question that Kelly's going to go through and
power through.
How many questions are there?
We've had about 10.
Okay, there's about 10 questions. Yeah. First thing that kind of comes to your mind, we're just going to go ahead and spit out 10 fast questions, and then that'll kind of be our session for the day. So I'll let Kelly go ahead and begin the rapid fire questions for you.
Okay, Dave. Favorite city you've ever lived in?
Oh, ever lived in? That is a tough one. Probably Seattle so far. Yeah. Okay.
Favorite
two children are born there, so that
holds a special place.
Yes.
That's awesome. Favorite sports movie?
Sports movie. Man, these are hard ones. Victory with Sylvester Stallone as a goalkeeper. Yeah.
Hey, love it. Cardio or strength training for you?
For me, 1,000% cardio, because I'm an ex-goalkeeper, and so I never hard cardio. I find when you get older, you want to train what you're least wired towards. So if you're super skinny, you want to strength train as you go through your life. And if you're not super skinny, you want to keep that. I say I run just to keep my heart alive,
Yeah.
So.
Dave's hot tip. Mm-hmm. Okay. Favorite Netflix show or show you've watched recently?
Definitely watching House of Dragons now. And my wife and I are very, whatever the most recent series on is, but currently it's House of Dragons.
House of Dragons. A lot of people watching that.
Yeah.
If you didn't work in sports, what would you be doing?
I'd be an engineer.
Wow. Does it all. Most memorable training moment throughout your career?
Most memorable training moment?
Mm-hmm.
When I was after my freshman year at Virginia Tech, I had the opportunity to go train with in Bordeaux in France with their second team, reserve team, which is my first exposure to highest level, European soccer, because I watched the top team train and then I'd train with the second team, and that definitely made me want to go on the soccer path. Like I was all in on trying to develop my professional career as far as I could.
Favorite player you've ever trained?
I would say Osvaldo Alonso, who was captain. He was captain for the Seattle Sounders when we won MLS Cup, who I had over 9 years. Cuban. We had highs, lows, and he's. I saw him develop as an athlete and a human being over the course of those 9 years. So.
That's special. And then best fan base.
Austin FC.
That's what we like to hear.
I
have a couple final questions because I'm super interested. When you were with Seattle, the Sounders, you created a summit during your time there. It became the leading sports conference. You recently announced on Twitter that Austin FC is going to be holding its first annual high performance symposium in December. How did that all come together?
In terms of starting in Seattle and then to here, or how the Austin one?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you had that experience in Seattle, but what made you, want to start it in Austin?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a great initiative, and my goal was always, I would always go travel overseas every off season, and I could never go to the number of places I wanted to go to. I couldn't see as many people as I wanted to, so I had this idea. I'm like, I'm going to get all the cool people that I want to hear talk, and I'm just going to run a conference. I'm going to invite them all, and they're going to do talks for me and my staff. And if people pay to come watch it, then all the better. Yeah. And it really just took off from there. And people wanted to come be a part of it. And so for me, it's an opportunity to bring the people that I want to hear talk on topics I want to hear about to come do talks and really engage in our community. And, and I think that's one. The second piece that I think is really valuable to this is because I'm kind of 1 foot in coaching, 1 foot in strength conditioning from that standpoint. Mm-hmm. And I had several times when I was in Seattle where I would have a strength coach call me and say, I don't know what to do with the soccer coaches. Like they're idiots. Like they don't understand strength conditioning. They don't understand true speed training. They just want to do soccer stuff and touch the crossbar and like just stuff that doesn't make any sense. Like, how should I talk to them?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then literally I had this with a Pac-12 program. And then a week later, this Pac-12 coach would call me and say, I don't know what to do with strength conditioning coaches. They just want to get my guys big and strong and they're sore all the time. Then it ruins my training sessions and I don't know what to do. And I remember thinking, like, I should do a conference where I get both these people in the same room together and just have this dialogue so they kind of understand each other's world. So that was the genesis of the conference originally.
That's awesome. So it'll be December 8th through 12th. Where can people find out more information about the event? Is it going to be open to the public?
Yeah, it's on our website. Okay. Yeah, so we have information on Austin FC's website. We've got our own Twitter. It's at ATX HP Symposium, I think is the Twitter handle. And you can get a link to the to our web there. It's on SeatGeek, and if you do a search on SeatGeek, you'll probably find the actual registration as well. So it's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 8th, 9th, 10th, Thursday afternoon through Sunday early afternoon.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Dave, we so appreciate your time coming in and chatting with us today.
Thank you.
The episode will be up on all streaming platforms. And follow us on Instagram @TrainATX.
Thank you. And thanks for having me.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.